Like I ended the last lecture, management is never happy when a project is delayed. Usually they want it sooner. They're always looking for it to be sooner because development is very expensive and design is very expensive. They want to get that product out the door as fast as they can to bring in income. So how do we accelerate a project? The overall project itself, not just a task. One thing we can do is start the project early. Well, that kind of makes sense, right? If I start it early, I can hopefully finish it early. But how do we do that? I'm working on this project. A lot of times what you will find as engineers, you will work on more than one project at a time. My son right now, he works for Kohler, just is in the process of finishing up a project, but he's also well into his second and third project. I too have had very similar situations where I had multiple projects working at different stages. So we start projects early. We kind of essentially are paralleling projects themselves. Another thing that we can do is to manage the scope of the project. A lot of times people will want to add more and more features to a project, which delays a project. So we need to kind of say, okay, here's the design of the project. We're going with this. Stop it at this point. So those are two ways we can accelerate a project and getting it done on time. But how do we accelerate the tasks of each project? Well, one thing we can do is, of course, concentrate on that critical path, right? Make sure all our resources are on that critical path. Because again, if anything slips on that project path, on the critical path, the whole deadline, the end date will change. So we want to make sure we are really concentrating on that end path, the critical path. We want to remove any safety times from a critical path. Engineers are very cagey. We like to add in some time because we don't know what might happen, right? So we add in some time into our project. Well, management will come down and say, how much of this can you remove, right? I know you've got some time added in. So we kind of remove some of that. Well, the problem with that, there's a couple problems and there's some good things with it. The problem is usually something does happen and now we don't have that safety time, and now we're always going to be behind in our project. So now we're going to get yelled at from upper management. The bad thing about keeping that safety time in there is if that time is there, we will use it. If you're like me, and most of you probably are, sometimes we're procrastinators. If I know I don't have to get this project done in 2 weeks, I won't. But if I have to get it in 1 week, I'll have to get it done in 1 week. So removing some of these safety times kind of pushes us faster. Again, we can overlap tasks, right? We can put things on a parallel schedule. Or sometimes we can maybe slightly overlap something, right? Maybe if we're doing concept generation on a large project, maybe we can get some of the parts going ahead of other parts that we know are solidified, and the other ones that we're still kind of getting new concepts on, we can wait and start those later. So kind of look at overlapping or doing things in parallel. Another thing is adding more resources, right? You can't do it all yourself. Sometimes you need more people to come in. Maybe you need design help, right, to bring in. Another thing is you can outsource tasks. And that isn't like shipping it out overseas. It maybe you have design work, like some CAD work. You could bring in some CAD people from another company that just does CAD work, and they could do the CAD work for you. Or maybe your machine shop being able to build prototypes is full and busy. So we're going to outsource it to a different machine shop that isn't part of our company, right? But they're maybe local within our city even, or whatever, our state. So those are some different things that we can do to accelerate the tasks of a project. So what are the steps we need to create a project plan, right? We've talked about a Gantt chart and a PERT chart. What are the steps that we need to do? Again, the very first step is to specify and write down all the individual tasks or activities that need to be completed. After we've done that, we need to determine the sequence of those activities. What is the order of those activities? Which one comes first? Which one comes next? What ones can we do in parallel? Or what ones can we do in a coupled manner? Then we draw our network diagram, also called a PERT diagram or a precedence diagram. The book calls it a precedence diagram. And that's kind of how I would start before the Gantt. Sometimes it kind of shows these interrelationships between each. So kind of it's nice to start with that and end maybe with a Gantt chart. Estimate the time to complete each activity, of course, and assign, then look at our critical path on our chart, maybe rearrange things so we can kind of make it shorter also. And then always update our Gantt and PERT chart as we need, as we progress. One thing that should also be on here is we should have a list of who is responsible for which activity. So these are the steps that you will need to create a Gantt or PERT chart and some tools to be able to accelerate a project.